Hare Krishna. So, okay. Okay. All right. Sorry, I had to hit all the okay, over and over again. All right. As I was saying last week, we started off. Uh, Shukade Goswami was talking about how some people conceive of the personality of Godhead resting within the body, and we had a discussion about how exact it was. He's measuring 8 inches with 4 hands, carrying a lotus, a bull, a chariot, a conch shell, and a club, respectively. So today we're going to be starting on text 9. And it appears that these next few verses are going to go into more detail describing the Lord within the heart. So I'll go ahead and chant text 9. Prasanavaktram nalinayate kshanam kandamba kinjalka prasangavasasham lasan maharatna hiranmayankaram spuran maharana kiriti kundalam. Alright, translation. His mouth expresses happiness. His eyes spread like the petals of a lotus, and his garments, yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower, are bedecked with valuable jewels. His ornaments are all made of gold, set with jewels, and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings. So there's no purport for this one. So I'll go ahead and go to the next one if that's okay.
Yes, of course, because we can discuss them both together, of course.
Exactly, yeah, both together. All right. Unidrahit panchkaja karnikalaye yogeshvara stapita parapallavam shilakshanam kastubaratna kandaram amlana lakshmiya vanamalayashitam. His lotus feet are placed over the whorls of the lotus-like hearts of the great mystics. On his chest is the Kastuba jewel, engraved with a beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his shoulders. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The ornaments, flowers, clothing, and all other decorations on the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead are identical with the body of the Lord. None of them are made of material ingredients. Otherwise, there would be no chance of their decorating the body of the Lord. As such, in the Vyoma, spiritual varieties are also distinguished from the material variegatedness. Alright, so this is kind of a short purport here, but the descriptions, what I can gather from these two verses, is that Shukadeva Goswami is going into further detail in describing what exactly the Paramatma looks like in the heart. So, what I understand from this verse is number one, Krishna himself is actually one of his expansions is Paramatma. Shirodakashayi Vishnu expands as Paramatma. And what we can understand from this is that, number one, he has form, because in the Paramatma realization, people come to some understanding that there's some form to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we can see here, not only does he have form, but it's saying that his garments are yellowish, like saffron, like the saffron of a kadamba flower, and he has jewels. His ornaments are made with gold. He wears a glowing headdress and earrings. And then from this next verse I just read, his lotus feet are placed over the whorls of the lotus-like hearts of the great mystics. Okay, well, actually, not that line. But it says here that on his chest is a Kastuba jewel engraved with a beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his shoulders. And then his torso is also garlanded with fresh flowers. So, what the second thing I get from this is that not only do we see that there's form, but we see that there's also some type of personality there as well, because he's wearing certain jewels, certain garments. Generally, people, like there would be, really. What would be the need for clothes, but we can see that Krishna has a certain way that he likes to, or as we could say, Krishna and the Paramama has a certain way that he likes to dress. And so typically, when somebody has a certain way that they like to dress, it implies that they have some type of personality. So not only is there form here, but we can also see even more that Krishna is a person, because he has certain decorations he likes to put on his body. um, Often humans, there's certain jewels and certain things that we like as well, and we can we can see that because of this shows that we are also part and parcel of Krishna. The desire, one of the characteristics of Krishna is that he's a great dresser, and so we know from the Shastras that the living entities, they have um, all the characteristics of Krishna in a small, minute quality. Although with some individual living entities, these characteristics, you can see them more in some than you can in others. So some people, you can see that they naturally know how to dress. They're always nicely dressed. They're a nice dresser. So this quality in them, or this ability, it ultimately comes from Krishna, which we can see here. He's always the perfect dresser. He's always looking very beautiful. It's making me think of this one pastime that we discussed the other day, and I don't remember all the details, so I'm going to paraphrase it. But it's about Krishna's jewels, and this is about two-armed Krishna. Um, and so, anyway, there was this thief who went to Vrindavan with the intention of stealing Krishna's jewels. So he went to Vrindavan looking everywhere for Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, where's, looking for Krishna. And out of his, desperate attempt to find Krishna, he finds Krishna there with all of his jewels. And he sees Krishna. He's like, "Oh, you have so many beautiful jewels." And Krishna's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Why don't you give me one?" And Krishna's like, "No, I can't. Mother Yashoda will get mad at me." you know and so, but ultimately, the story goes that, by having this association with Krishna, he ultimately got purified. So we see in whatever condition Krishna is in, whether he is, in little baby form in Goloka Vrindavan, or if you see him as his expansion, the Paramatma, he is always beautifully dressed and garlanded. And we can see here that he's always happy. One of Krishna's features is that it says that his face is smiling with happiness. So we can gather from this that Krishna is always blissful. One of the features is that he is Sachit Ananda Vigraha, full of knowledge, bliss, and eternality. And so on his mouth expresses happiness. So as living entities, we're also meant to experience this happiness. But quite often, because we identify with the material nature, then that's when feelings of lamentation, depression, and things like this come along. So, anyway, I don't want to take up all the time, but these are just some realizations that I had on this two verses. One, that Krishna has form, this shows, and that second is that he has personality.
Hare Krishna. Yes, this is all very interesting what you said. Apparently, according to these texts, we can see very clearly that Krishna has form, and that his form is always decorated in certain ways. But the thing that strikes me about the descriptions is that not only do they bring to light, the reality of the physical form, but also they tend to be kind of like poetic also. I mean, it's kind of like everything stands for something as well as it being, a distinct form. We have things like a mouth that expresses happiness. This is not a physical attribute. Now we're talking about the happiness, but that how it's seen, it's like emanating from his mouth. It's like his eyes, the petals of a lotus. This is like beauty, and coming from the water, whatever. These are all beautiful, beautiful, beautiful poetic imagery. And his garments yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower, not just yellow, but yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower. So this brings even more of the feeling of the beauty that's emanating from this, this being, that Krishna, is this like it's more than just a physical representation. Okay, because there's gold and there's jewels, so we have this feeling of a glowing headdress, like this is like his aura. He's just glowing, and it's quite powerful imagery. It's quite powerful imagery. Of course, anybody who really looks or pretends to look upon Krishna will certainly be dazzled by such imagery. Um, uh, Continuing, the lotus feet are placed over the lotus-like hearts of the great mystics. Here is a more of a connection, a connection with, those who can see him, the mystics, the great mystics. Um, the Kaustuba jewel, I guess, is a very, very special jewel. I don't, there's a story about this, perhaps.
Yeah, this is the jewel that came out of the Milk Ocean, I believe.
I see, I see. Well, it's all very beautiful imagery. So besides being, the how would you say, the the assurance that here there is a physical form, there's also beautiful imagery attached to this physical form.
And there's something as you were speaking, I was thinking, because you brought it very nicely about how this is also poetry, and it's true. The Bhagavatam is poetry. Like the verses, even the verses, they're written in a poetic meter. They rhyme like poetry. Um, and one of the things that sometimes I feel I miss out on is because I wasn't born in India. So when it talks about things like kadamba trees and like in the Damodar sculptures, bimba fruit, I'm like, what is that? So sometimes I've had to like look it up. So sometimes the symbol like that can get a little bit lost on me.
Well,
At least
maybe
I've had.
the symbol is just, for me, without even being sure exactly which is the kandamba flower. For me, it's an imagery of the most beautiful things, the most beautiful flowers in the world, the most beautiful smelling and looking things in the world. Which so
I see.
exactly which it is doesn't even hardly matter. Because they're being blessed by Krishna, they become the most beautiful.
Yeah, so you just think of the most beautiful thing you can imagine. I get it. But I was gonna add that when I did go to India, and of course too, like here in Tucson in our pond, we've had lotus flowers and stuff. So I was familiar with what a lotus flower looked like because we have those here in America. But when I did go to India, I remember one time I was sitting where I was sitting right next to the temple at this shop, and all of a sudden something hit the roof like thud like that. And the devotee I was sitting with, he goes, "Oh, that's a kadamba fruit." I was like, "Oh, a kadamba tree."
I don't know what the fruit looks
So I
like.
was like,
No,
so it's like, now I know, now I know. And then like he
because
just went
I've
up
heard
there. I
much
was like, "Oh my."
description of the flower, but not so much description. Actually, in one of Manunatha Maharaja's books, On a Silver Platter, there's quite a chapter, a section with much detail about the Kadamba flower, what it looks
Huh.
like, smells like, and its significance in the Vedic teachings. You know,
Oh,
so
that's very good.
I
Very
highly
good.
recommend reading it.
Yeah. Okay. That there's a chatting sauce or butter. Jay. But anyway, all right, should we go to the next one?
Yes, I think we should go on. These are definitely
Okay.
more related things. Perhaps we will be joined by others soon. Let's
Yeah.
see. This is text 11.
Yeah, and it appears that, for a few texts, this is going to go on this description. So,
So
I
I'll
mean,
read two texts.
yeah, the purports are really short. We could just do two.
Yes. Okay. Um, I need to spare you my Sanskrit until I get the rhythm of the chanting down.
So basically, in Shima Bhagavatam, because you asked about the rhythms,
Yes.
right now, like, okay, there's two main ones, and there's the Brahma Samhita meter, but I just remember it by like the tune. So this tune goes.
I see.
Yeah.
Vibhushitam Mekalayan Guliyakair Mahadanar Nupura Kankana Dibhi Snignama Lakun Sita Nila Lontalar Viro Kamana Nana Hasa Pesalam.
Close.
Yeah, right.
I'll help you.
I just decided to be brave.
Very
I
good,
know
very good.
right, but it's an attempt.
Don't worry, you'll have it down like in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada gives us this translation and this short purport. He is well decorated with an ornamental wreath about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets, his bangles, his oiled hair curling with a bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most beautiful person amongst all others, and Srila Shukadeva Goswami describes every part of his transcendental beauty, one after another, in order to teach the impersonalists that the personality of Godhead is not an imagination by the devotee for the facility of worship, but is the Supreme Person in fact and figure. The impersonal feature of the absolute truth is but his radiation, as the sun rays are but radiation from the sun. And well, I could go on, but the next purport is quite long. We could just say a couple words about this particular one.
Of course.
The it's more of the same, but now we have valuable jewels on the fingers, the rings, his leglets, his bangles, his oily hair. It's just more of the beauty, including the beautiful smiling face, which is perhaps the most important of all.
So we see not only is he a good dresser, but he also takes care of himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, he doesn't need to, but when I first joined Krishna consciousness, one of my roommates told me that in India, it's very common for people to oil their hair. They put oil in their hair. So when I was reading this about the Paramatma, how his hair is oiled back, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I see. Because the Vedic, India has remnants of the Vedic culture, and so the Vedic culture is Krishna's original culture. So I thought that connection was really cool. And then also how he wears bangles. A lot of the people in India will wear bangles. I mean, especially you'll see it more with married women. They have bangles on their arms, but also I've seen it on men as well. And yeah, and then rings too, studded rings. I've seen that as well. Mostly nowadays, I think it's most people's they have rings according to their astrology. Like, okay, this is for my Mars, my Mercury, things like that. But Krishna wears jewels as well.
Should I go on and read number 12?
Yeah, go ahead. Unless you have some other realizations about 11.
Okay, let me dive right into the translation and.
Oh wait, I forgot. I was gonna ask this.
Okay.
When it says he's decorated with an ornamental wreath around his waist, have you seen what that looks like?
No.
Because when it says wreath, I'm kind of curious because the only wreath
Sounds like garland.
Garland, yeah, maybe like garland, yeah. Because the only thing I can think of is like what you would hang on the door for Christmas.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be something different than that. But I'm just trying to get like the image in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are any if there's any artwork with that kind of focus on what was around his waist. We could begin to look for it.
Yeah, look for it. Yeah.
All right, going on to text 12. The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. So this is kind of like rounding it all up. All this imagery that we've just seen, this is kind of like now we're going to, pull it all together. It's the smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. Srila Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, text 5, that it is said that the impersonalist undergoes a series of difficult programs on account of his impersonal meditation. But the devotee, due to the Lord's personal service, progresses very easily. Impersonal meditation is therefore a source of suffering for the impersonalist. Hence, the devotee has an advantage over the impersonalist philosopher. The impersonalist is doubtful about the personal feature of the Lord, and therefore he always tries to meditate upon something which is not objective. For this reason, there is an authentic statement in the Bhagavatam regarding the positive concentration of the mind on the factual form of the Lord. The process of meditation recommended herein is Bhakti Yoga, or the process of devotional service after one is liberated from the material conditions. Jnana Yoga is the process of liberation from the material conditions. After one is liberated from the conditions of material existence, for example, when one is nivrita, as previously stated herein, or when one is freed from all material necessities, one becomes qualified to discharge the process of Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga includes Jnana Yoga, or in other words, the process of pure devotional service simultaneously serves the purpose of Jnana Yoga. Liberation from material conditions is automatically achieved by the gradual development of pure devotional service. These effects of Bhakti Yoga are called Anartha Nivrita. Things which are artificially acquired gradually disappear along with the process of Bhakti Yoga. Meditation on the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, the first processional step, must show its effect by anartha nivriti. The grossest type of anartha, which binds the conditioned soul in material existence, is sex desire. And this sex desire gradually develops in the union of the male and female. When the male and female are united, the sex desire is further aggravated by the accumulation of buildings, children, friends, relatives, and wealth. When all these are required, the conditioned soul becomes overwhelmed by such entanglements, and the sense of egoism, or the sense of myself and mine, becomes prominent, and the sex desire expands to various political, social, altruistic, philanthropic, and many other unwanted engagements, resembling the foam of the sea waves, which becomes very prominent at one time and at the next moment vanishes as quickly as a cloud in the sky. The conditioned soul is encircled by such products as well as products of the sex desire, and therefore Bhakti Yoga leads to gradual evaporation of the sex desire, which is summarized in three headings, namely profit, adoration, and distinction. All conditioned souls are mad after these different forms of sex desire, and one shall see for himself how much he has been freed from material hankerings based primarily on the sex desire. As a person feels his hunger satisfied after eating each morsel of foodstuff, he must similarly be able to see the degree to which he has been freed from sex desire. The sex desire is diminished along with its various forms by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, because Bhakti Yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation, even if the devotee is not materially well educated. Okay, I've read about half, and I'm going to stop reading there because I think we can get the idea of what Srila Prabhupada's saying, of course, is that we use Bhakti Yoga. Through the Bhakti Yoga, we will overcome our attachment to our material nature, especially the sex desire being perhaps the strongest of the material desires. I don't know. There's been some. I've heard some debate about the regulative principles, for instance, and which of one is the most difficult or the most, most daunting for people to try to, undertake. And supposedly, maybe I've been outvoted. I've been told it's the sex desire. But I don't know. There are some that may not agree. There are some that may say that for each individual, they have different struggles to make with it, the different regulative principles or the different material desires. And but here, Srila Prabhupada is focusing a lot on the sexual desire because it kind of how should we say, it expands into other areas of our life, and it begins this feeling of what's of myself and what's mine, and in the interrelationships and the relationship with the material world. So, as a matter of fact, here in the purport, even Srila Prabhupada becomes quite poetic when he talks about the philanthropic and many other unwanted engagements, resembling the foam of the sea waves, which becomes very prominent at one time and at the next moment vanishes as quickly as a cloud in the sky. Wow, that's even a mixed metaphor. We've gone from the ocean up into the sky in one sentence, but this is very, very powerful stuff, which can be demonstrated through this kind of imagery. And as I pointed out, I think the important thing is that when we, instead of thinking that we must be perfect in order to engage in devotional service, I guess the point being that once we begin to engage in devotional service, the rest of our life will become more perfect little by little as we overcome our attachment to our material desires. So it's like that, kind of like two processes going on at the same time, and you can't like just do one process first and then the other process, you know. And so that's all I have to say about that text, Mother Reminder. If you'd like to add something now.
Yeah, in fact, I can concur with what you were saying about the regular principles in general. I mean, you can say in one sense, if somebody were to say it's individual, you could say yes, that's true, but there are generalizations. And if you take a study of why people fall down, in general, you're going to find that uh, intoxication and illicit sex kind of go hand in hand. Maybe they had some, um, for some people, they had some prior addiction, like smoking was a big one, or some of them even like were into hardcore drugs. But for a lot of people, that were addicted to intoxicants previously prior to coming to Krishna consciousness, um, I see sometimes they might fall back into smoking or drinking alcohol or something like that, especially when things get tough. But illicit sex on the whole, it is kind of a big one because if an individual is trained up, they don't eat meat from the time they're very young. Generally, the desire to eat meat is not going to be there. And if you're never exposed to intoxicants, you don't really have the desire to do them. It's like for example, I've never done heroin. I don't have a desire to do heroin. But I have a friend who's neurotic, who's a former heroin addict. You put her in a room with people that are shooting up heroin, and she's gonna be like, dangerous situation. So, and then also with gambling, if you're not really exposed to gambling. I mean, I'm talking about maybe like gambling in a subtle way. Yeah, we kind of all do that. But in general, gambling in terms of like gambling addiction, if you're not really exposed to that type of thing, you're not going to do it. But with illicit sex, that's a hard one because even if you're raised up away from meat eating, intoxication, and gambling, sex desire kind of comes with the body being embodied. Look in the case of Ajamil. He was brought up, had very nice parents, brought up in very nice Vedic culture. He was a Brahmana, but he saw a man, a Sudra, low class man, with a prostitute, out and about, and they were embracing and doing, what guys do when they get a prostitute for the evening. And he saw them, and then boom, gone, because there was some lusty desire within him. So yeah, in general, that's something that can really carry somebody away. However, Srila Prabhupada, it's really sweet. He makes the point in this purport that by bhakti yoga, let me find what it says. I think it's at the end here. The sex desire is diminished along with its various forms, like various forms, profit, distinction, and adoration. That's a big one, because even when we get rid of the gross desires, the desires for profit, distinction, and adoration are kind of still there. We want to be known. We want something for our service in return. It can be there very subtly. Somebody told me once, eventually you'll find out that following the four regs is the easy part. Because he was talking about getting rid of the desires for profit, distinction, and adoration. That's the real subtle sense gratification. And ultimately, we have to root out if we're going to go back to Godhead. And so Prabhupada, as I was saying, Prabhupada says here, like in the end of what you just read, the sex desire is diminished along with its various forms by the process of bhakti yoga, because bhakti yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation. even if the devotee is not very well educated. So the process of bhakti yoga, when we practice it right, all these unwanted things gradually diminish. I think Prabhupada also used the word anartha nivritti in this purport, which is a stage of bhakti, and it's the stage where all the unwanted things are being taken away, and it can be a difficult stage in Krishna consciousness. Often people when you're in the stage of Nartan Nivriti, the mind is going back and forth. You have some attraction to sense gratification, and then you have some attraction to Krishna. So I asked the senior devotee about this, and she's told me, she said, in the stage of Anartha Nivriti, you go after sense gratification sometimes, even though you have some attraction to Krishna, but you realize that doesn't make me happy. And then you go all the way back to Krishna. And then because you still have some attachment to some material sense gratification. You'll go back and then you'll be like, okay, back to Krishna. But gradually, you start to get more and more intelligence as you're practicing bhakti yoga that, okay, this is really not making me happy. And then you just give it up, you want to give it up altogether, and then you become fixed. So if you find yourself going back and forth, you can kind of know where you're at in this process. Um, which trust me, I'm lucky if I'm even on the stage with North and Ritti. But anyway, so it's very sweet. But if we do this process right, then these things become eradicated from the heart. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also talks about in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when we're chanting the holy name, how if we're doing it with offenses, these weeds can come up in the desire of profit, distinction, and adoration. And if we're not careful with our chanting, then these weeds can start to choke our bhakti creeper a bit. So we have to be very careful when we're chanting our don't, because it'll look like bhakti, but you'll notice, I'm doing all this service, I'm doing this, but you'll notice if, okay, how am I responding if this doesn't work out the way I'm wanting it to go, or if, at this service nobody appreciates my service because I did this. I cooked the whole feast for Janmashtami and nobody else, and then I'm just complaining that, I didn't get recognition for it. So we can see there may be that desire for service, but there's that desire for adoration and distinction. So you have to be very careful, because this can also lead to Vaishnava Aparad as well. We can be doing so much service, but then we don't get the proper distinction and adoration that we're kind of really wanting from it. And then we start offending devotees and then fall down. That really, really, really hurts. So this subtle, what's called here, this subtle sex desire, we have to be very attentive. This is the more intricate, difficult part of bhakti. And I've noticed within myself, sometimes even with service, if I'm like, okay, did anyone notice I just did that? Or something like that. And I have to say, okay, you're wanting profit, distinction, and adoration. That's why a lot of times temples, when they ask for donations from the public, they'll be like, if you give this much, we'll put your name on this, stone or this plaque. Because people in general, they want some recognition for what they've done. But as devotees, our desire should be, I just want to please Krishna. I don't care about getting any sort of result or any sort of recognition from this. So yeah, and if we are very attentive with our minds, it's harder than it looks. So anyway, yeah, a lot that could be said about this program, but that's one thing in particular that stuck out to me.
Yes.
So should I read the next part?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Can you remind me? I'm on in the report, but I can't remember which sentence you stopped on.
Let's see. I think you reread the sentence where I stopped, something about,
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. I did right here. All right, all right, all right. Knowledge means knowing things. All right. I
yeah.
think I found it. By the way, that noise in the background, is that that frog that's in Puerto Rico, the coqui?
Yes, you may very well
Yeah,
be doing the coquille. Yes.
that's the noise. Oh wow.
Yeah,
I
and
was
my
wondering.
fan, but the coquille, it sounds like coquille, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Knowledge means knowing things as they are. And if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are at all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. When the conditioned soul finds by culture of knowledge that material necessities are, un, are unwanted things, he becomes detached from such unwanted things. This stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that the transcendentalist is required to be self sufficient and should not beg from the rich blind persons to fulfill the bare necessities of life. Shukadeva Goswami has suggested some alternatives for the bare necessities of life, namely the problem of eating, sleeping, and shelter, but he has not suggested any alternative for sex satisfaction. One who has the sex desire still with him should not at all try to accept the renounced order of life. For one who has not attained to this stage, there is no question of a renounced order of life. So, by the gradual process of devotional service under the guidance of a proper spiritual master and following the principles of Bhagavatam, one must be able to at least control the gross sex desire before one accepts the renounced order of life actually. So, purification means getting free gradually from sex desire, and this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord as described herein, beginning from the feet. One should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from the sex desire. The smiling face of the Lord is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and there are many upstarts who at once try to begin with the 10th canto, and especially with the 5 chapters, which delineate the Rasa Leela of the Lord. This is certainly improper. By such improper study or hearing of Bhagavatam, the material opportunists have played havoc on indulgence in sex life in the name of Bhagavatam. This vilification of Bhagavatam is rendered by the acts of the so called devotees. One should be free from all kinds of sex desire before he tries to make a show of recital of Bhagavatam. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur clearly defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. He says, Yata yata dishcha suditi vishaya lampatyam tvajanti tata tata darayet iti chiti sudi taratam yaineva dhyana taratamyam uktam. And as one gets free from the intoxication of sex indulgence by purification of intelligence, one should step forward for the next meditation, or in other words, the progress of meditation on the different limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord should be enhanced in proportion to the progress of purification of the heart. The conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to meditation above the feet of the Lord. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam by them should be restricted to the first and second cantos of the great literature. One must complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then one should be admitted into the realm of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai. All right.
Would you repeat the text again, the original text?
Okay, at the very top, yes. The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. So Prabhupada, in what I just read, he's talking about first how when one realizes something is unnecessary materially, they give it up. So the process of bhakti yoga is that when one starts to make advancement, naturally the desire for anything that becomes an impediment to Krishna consciousness, we don't want to associate with it, or we don't want to be involved with it. So you'll notice that as we practice sincerely hearing and chanting, desires for material life, they start to naturally decrease within us. But also, with that said, another important point that was mentioned after that is that Shukadeva Goswami, he mentions, where is it here? Yeah, he mentions alternatives from Shukadeva Goswami has suggested some alternatives for the bare necessities of life. So yeah, namely the problem of eating and sleeping and such, shelter and so forth. But he didn't suggest any alternative for sex desire. So Shukadeva Goswami himself is a renunciate, and Shukadeva Goswami is talking about renunciation in that on that level. But Prabhupada says that if one has some sort of sex desire, that they shouldn't try to artificially accept the renounced order of life. And this has caused a lot of trouble within religion, because generally people have respect for sages that are celibate, and they see them as being sources of spiritual knowledge. But people have been cheated by others who have accepted this renounced order of life and still have the sex desire within them. So therefore, Prabhupada is saying that one should be guided under a spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada will often recommend that if one still has this desire, that they enter Grihastha ashram first. And in a seminar that I actually heard from Prabhupada Priya Devi Dasi, it was to get married or not to get married. And a lot of the seminar, it was very practical, because it was like, hey, look, if like you're struggling with sex desire, better to be in the Grihastha ashram, even if say you're like 50 or something, better to be there than to try to artificially renounce, because then you're just gonna struggle. It's better to kind of be honest with yourself about where you're at. First we have to know where we are, and then from there we can make advancement. So generally that's recommended. And then also Prabhupada says, which is quite interesting, that one should not go beyond the first and second cantos if they still have this desire. But yet we have the whole entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So how do we understand this? And I've also been told that, and there's another statement, that if one hears the pastimes of Krishna, like Prabhupada talks about this in Krishna book, especially when you're getting into the Rasa Leela, that if one hears about this from a proper devotee, that's fixed, then one actually loses. It helps one in losing that desire for sex life. But if one approaches these topics not under the guidance of a proper spiritual master, then there's a tendency to take them cheaply. So that's why you'll notice with I think you notice with the Krishna book, how there's a lot of philosophy in there that's interwoven, with the pastime. So Prabhupada, he did that on purpose, because he didn't know, if he would be able to finish the whole entire Bhagavatam. So he he went ahead and did Krishna book and put his purports into the pastimes, so that we would have them. So we can know that as long as we're hearing these pastimes like from Krishna book, they're coming from Prabhupada, who's giving us the philosophy that's intertwined with these pastimes, so that we have the proper understanding. And by studying this, because Prabhupada also wanted this book, when it was printed, he said distribute it widely. So he wanted it to be given to the public. And so this is because he's given the whole entire philosophy within this Krishna book so expertly, along with giving the pastimes. so that one hears them attentively, then they can actually get free from sex desire. But other than that, if one is just approaching the 10th canto to be like, oh, I just want to hear the pastimes, not really caring about the philosophy. You're just reading the text and not the purport and things like that. Then you have a tendency to get in trouble, especially if you haven't read the first 9. I remember at the University of Florida, there was a class called Indian mythology. And and basically the class was, when they got to Krishna, they just talked about 10th canto pastimes. There was a book on Srimad Bhagavatam, and they gave it to the students, and it was Krishna's pastimes in the 10th canto. It was given by some professor. And that's what they had to learn about Krishna. And I remember when they would come to Krishna lunch, we would tell them, well, if you really want to understand about Krishna, then you need to read, up to the first 9. So we would give them first canto. And I did a lot of first canto Srimad Bhagavatams that way. But this is the general tendency, one wants to take, Krishna's pastimes cheaply because the Leela is very easy to hear. The philosophy is a little bit more difficult to sit down and hear. But for this age and for us, Prabhupada is expertly giving us this Leela along with the purports. So that we can understand who Krishna is by his pastimes, but also we have this philosophy to understand it in the proper perspective, that these pastimes aren't ordinary. They're not just between men and women, like here in the material world, but this is on the pure absolute level. And that's one thing that I guess to say I really appreciate about Prabhupada more and more as I get into studying his books, is how he, really wanted to give us everything, before he went back to Godhead or wherever he is preaching now.
True. And this is very, very, that is very admirable. And not only should we, here it is also, how would you say, emphasize that not only do we focus, on the physical manifestations of the Lord, but here it talks about meditation, and we must meditate. We must meditate on the Lord. This is very important, that we must meditate on his transcendental form. And this is, just to kind of like wrap up what we were saying, about this this particular text, or these texts that we have read today, that how important it is to recognize that the Lord has physical form, but that the physical form is also well decorated, and for reasons, that to show his glowing effulgence, and it's so I don't know if I went off on a tangent from what you were saying, Mother Lalanga, but I think I just want to kind of wrap up what we were talking about today.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, because there are many points and many perspectives that we could take, but yeah, the text ultimately is mentioning about how meditation on this form of the Lord, and ultimately, it begins from the feet, as Prabhupada says, and then gradually one progresses upward. So, like in the same way we take darshan starts from the feet and then goes up. So.
Sure, and the same way we read Srimad Bhagavatam, we're not supposed to get into the 10th canto.
Right.
Although now my curiosity is up, everybody talks about the 10th canto, how we shouldn't read the 10th canto. I mean, wow. Talk about being, curious, but.
Just read Krishna book.
Yeah, okay, well, I did read Krishna book, so.
There you go. All right. So, should we stop here?
Yeah, I think we we can wrap up.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And if you would like, please come join us every Monday. You're more than welcome to come and join in this discussion with us.
Yes, and very nice to know that some of you may even be there now. I don't know if we have Govinda watching us now or Dr. Rich, but it's very nice. The more, the merrier. So please join us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Personally, I would kind of like to move the hour earlier in the day, but Govinda insisted it should be at this late hour, but yet sometimes he doesn't make it. So we might want to consider, especially with the time change coming up in a few weeks. But we'll talk about that privately in our group discussion. Yeah.
All right. Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Manunatha Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai Maharaj. See you guys next week. Haribol.
Haribol.